Good afternoon, everybody. This is another edition of the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. Lots of stuff we're going to get into. I actually have a new segment as we separate this program into three parts, but kind of go after them at all different times. So it's not necessarily in order, but we talk about baseball, sports, and unifying America. So please feel free, comment anything that's on your mind in the world, and we can try to keep that discussion going. I do have a new segment that we're going to put towards the end of the show today, and we're going to call it Who Cares? So we put some music beds in there, and we're going to discuss the last topic that I want to hit up, and we're going to try to do this every day. We're going to try to talk about something that is about the world, and I promise you, it's nothing political. I don't take a stance on politics. I don't tolerate politics. And I recommend for everybody that obsesses themselves with politics and what they think about it and what their feelings are as opposed to what other people think. All you're doing is you're walking in quicksand. You're creating more issues and more problems for yourself. So I suggest just stay away from it. A couple things going on. I do want to do a little recap of the U.S. Open. A couple things obviously stood out to me. Congratulations to Brooks Koepka, his second straight U.S. Open championship. And I tell you, there was enough going on in regards to the action on the course. I think we could touch on a couple different topics. But I want to start out by talking about soccer and talking about the World Cup, because obviously it's getting a lot of attention. And if you heard me last week, I was talking about how it stood out, how so many, or a handful of the prominent teams that we all know and expect to see in the World Cup are not competing, or didn't make the cut, or didn't make the tournament. And, there may have been a bigger story of who's not in as opposed to who is in. Now, obviously, from the United States standpoint, you have the situation going on with Landon Donovan, where, he has this endorsement deal that he sets up before the qualifiers are set up. U.S. doesn't qualify, and all of a sudden, he's got to stand up and try to validate the contract he just signed or the endorsement deal that he just got. He decides he wants to promote Mexico because he has ties to Mexico. He's played a lot of world soccer, and I guess if there's a second favorite country outside of the United States, which is where he was born and raised, he would go with Mexico. I don't understand why that was that big of a story. Anybody that's criticizing that, anybody that's making a big deal about Landon Donovan all of a sudden supporting Mexico, it was basically, you do something outside the box or creative like that, or you end up making a decision to say, hey, I'm going to leave the money on the table. I'm not going to take this endorsement deal because the United States did not qualify for the World Cup. And for anybody that says or suggests that he should do that or should have done that, I would like you to tell me that if you're going to be given a multi-million-dollar endorsement deal, that you're going to do the same thing, that you would put those millions and pass those millions up just because you were not part of a team that qualified for the World Cup. I don't agree with that. But the one thing I did want to get to, I was watching a couple different games. I watched the Senegal game. Congratulations to them, getting a big win, a surprising win against Poland. I've seen a handful of games, and I got to be honest, for those that follow world soccer on a day in and day out basis, maybe you could chime in. I don't know a ton of it. I don't know a ton about it. I understand the way it works. I understand the way the tournament works. You can obviously see with the action of the players and what they do and what they stand for. Obviously, from its impact on the entire world, it makes a big deal. And, when you consider the number one sport in the entire world is world soccer. And it's by a mile. There's nothing that goes on in this country that could even challenge world soccer for the significance and the impact that it has on the billions and billions upon people in this world. And to understand it, I don't. I get the sport. I know how it's played. I know the rules. But, as far as its popularity, you're talking about a really huge, massive field that you're playing on. And I got to be honest, following the tournament a little bit over the last couple days, I've seen a little more action than I expected. I happened to not watch those couple games that were decided 1-0. And anybody that wants to throw the word nil out there, please, it's not a word to really use in a conversation. You can say 0, 1-0, not 1-0. But the main thing I wanted to get into following the Russia game today against Egypt, you had a situation where it kind of reminded me years ago where you had that player that ended up, doing that bicycle kick, kicking a ball in his own goal, and about a month or so later they find him dead because that goal that ended up being scored cost his country a major game. And you could have seen a potential of that happening again today. Now, obviously, Russia pulls away and looks like, especially in the last 20, 30 minutes of the match, the better team in beating Egypt today. But the first goal of the game was scored on an own goal. Or in other words, it was a ball that ended up being kicked towards the middle of the circle or the square or whatever you call it, and was hit by the player on Egypt to try to kick the ball away from the offensive player, ends up going in its own goal. And the issue that I got with that, because there's one thing that you can't really change. And you can't really change the fact that something like that can happen. But as it applies to the life of a human being, you think about that guy, I believe the last name was Escobar, and it ends up, with the bicycle kick at his own goal happened, 10 years ago or so. And fans are so bitter and pissed off that that guy did that they end up coming after him and killing him and taking his life. And you wonder in a situation like that, is there anything that anybody could have done to prevent that? Well, obviously, you take that guy and you get him as far away from these bitter and angry people as possible, which makes a little sense if you could somehow do that. You got the whole witness protection program. Maybe you give him a different identity, put him miles and miles away, and nobody will ever be able to identify him. And you could give the guy an opportunity to live the rest of his life if it is, in fact, in danger. But in this situation, or in future situations that could happen in world soccer, I compare to a lot of what you see in the National Hockey Association and hockey in the United States. But not just hockey in the United States, but hockey in the entire world. Hockey, just like soccer, is a world sport. Doesn't anywhere match up with soccer in regards to its popularity throughout the world. But one thing that hockey does right, that makes a lot of sense, is if a puck somehow hits off of a defensive player and goes into his own net, the person that is credited for the goal is the person on the offensive team that last touched it or last made contact with the puck before it went into the defensive player and into the net. I think soccer should change their scoring to something similar. Because now you have, an own goal. This guy scored a goal for the other team. And his name is thrown out there. Hey, how did the first goal score? Well, so-and-so kicked the ball in his own net. Or so-and-so put the ball in his own net accidentally. It doesn't matter if it was accidental or not. The fact that you're talking about the scoring of the particular goal, the first person that's mentioned is the person that kicked it or mistakenly had the ball go off of them into their own net. In hockey, it's not ruled that way. When the scoring is put back, the replay officials and all of those that are trying to figure out who, in fact, scores the goal, goes back and realizes, all right, the person that took the shot with the stick that deflected off of the defensive player gets credit for the goal. And I think if you want to keep lives saved down the road and keep people from being known for kicking the ball into their own net and prevent another situation like you had years ago when that poor player that kicked, did the bicycle kick and the ball went in his own net, you can save a person like that's life. Describe the play, give credit to the goal for the person that last made contact with it. And I think that's the way that you have to do it. Because in hockey, you don't see any issues where you even remember what player the puck deflected off of and went into its own net. In soccer, you know it because that person essentially is getting credited for a goal for the other team. That's something that could be changed, that could potentially save somebody's life down the road. I think it's something that soccer, maybe on the smaller level, maybe within a certain country, maybe one country could be the start of a revolution. And what you hope doesn't happen is a goal that deflects off of somebody as we hit the halfway point here in the pass ball show. What you obviously don't want to happen is a ball to deflect or hit off of one player into his own net, not only have it decide a game, but to get the fans that much bitter, disappointed, and pissed off at that one individual person, and somehow that person could put themselves in harm's way. Somehow that person could end up losing their life because of it. That's not what you want to see happen. The World Cup is set up, obviously it's a very national thing, so everybody within their own individual countries, whether you're in the United States, maybe you have a nationality or some ties to one of the other countries that are in there, obviously there's a lot of passion behind it. But the passion should, at some point, had cooler heads prevail when we're talking about life or death. And I keep referring to that player that years ago ends up kicking the ball into his own net and ends up getting killed. He wasn't working for the other side. He didn't kick the ball in his own net intentionally. If there's anybody in the world that felt terrible about it, that felt worse than anybody else, it was that individual. I mean, you're never going to find, particularly in soccer, and I tell you, I understand there's corruption that exists throughout the world. There's corruption that exists in every sport. I mean, you look at the Olympic Committee and the stuff that was tied to the amount of money that was paid, for Russia to host, the World Cup. There's a lot of different things that are out there that are evil and corrupt. But I tell you, for one to be able to throw or influence the results of a soccer match, particularly in the World Cup, you're going to have to really go out of your way to try to cover that up. And if somebody did prove to do that on purpose, I tell you, not only would they have to deal with, law enforcement and the rules committee and stuff like that, they're going to have to deal with their own country in which they're happening to play for. That is going to make their life pretty rough. So I don't think something like that is even feasible as far as somebody, being influenced to a point where they would try to throw a soccer match. So now that we all understand that, we should understand that the athlete's safety should be the most important thing. And the safety that should exist on the field and as it's being enforced on the field should be the same as the safety that's being enforced once these players leave the field. So if you have somebody that accidentally kicks the ball into their own net or has a ball deflect off of them into their own net, they should not be credited with the goal scored for the other team. That goal should be credited to the person on the offensive team that last touched it, whether they're the ones that kicked it or the ball happened to come off of their foot or their head last. That should be the person that should be credited for the goal. And it doesn't matter if it hit off of a defensive player. It should go to the person on the offensive team that made contact with the ball last. Once again, this is John Pielli, Pass Ball Show. Glad to be with you. Moving on, talking about the U.S. Open this past weekend. You had the situation with Phil Mickelson and obviously a lot of the snobs, per se. Right? Because I always think of Caddyshack when we think of the rank and file of the golf association. These are the people that are dressed in a full suit, and they stand for everything that is politically correct in the world of golf. They take this rule book that exists in the world of golf, and they make it like it is the Bible. Now, could you be pissed off if you're a golf fan or somebody in the establishment of golf that Phil Mickelson hit his ball while it was still rolling and could have potentially used it to his own advantage. In other words, the ball rolling so far away that he ends up stopping it, causing himself a 2-stroke penalty, and ending his hole. Well, I think that's something that should be addressed. And if the penalty of what he did should have resulted in him being disqualified, I don't think Phil Mickelson would have worried about it. You're talking about a guy who obviously is a golf icon, a guy who is very popular in the world of golf. He has won whatever, I think 5 majors. He's won 40-something tournaments. He's got a ton of fans. And if he decided to stop playing golf right now, he'd be okay. He made a decision that obviously wasn't very good in regards to the accordance of the rule book with professional golf. So they could have assessed the 2-stroke penalty. They could have also disqualified him. And either way, it would have been the rank and file or the rule book of the PGA Tour enforcing itself and doing what it needs to do. What we need to get away from is the whole, snobbish things that are said by the people that consider themselves more holier than thou, as if golf is their sport and they have the power to preside to the point where they make their rules stand out to be more holier than thou of any other rules that exist in the history of the world. Like I said before, when you talk about the rule book of the PGA in regards to golf and you put it up there right against the Bible and you say that the PGA Tour rule book is more holier than that of the Bible. I mean, that's one thing that we could probably get away from. I mean, there's been plenty of scenarios where you talk about, illegal drops, but you've also talked about movement of a ball that is not controlled by a human being. In other words, if a ball's in a certain spot and you go to hit it and it gets struck after it moved and it wasn't the fault of the person that was hitting the ball, they get assessed a penalty. So a lot of silly things that go on. So I think at some point the PGA Tour rule book should be gone over in a certain way where you understand that, yes, the rules are in place for a reason, but the stupid rules that penalize people for stuff that they didn't do intentionally does need to change. And I tell you, watching the U.S. Open, obviously congratulations to Brooks Koepka, 2nd straight U.S. Open. It's funny, the Travelers Championship is going to be this weekend, and you hear on, competing radio station, all of a sudden his name gets thrown into promos. Oh yeah, you were talking about Dustin Johnson, you were talking about Jordan Spieth, you were talking about Tiger Woods, anybody else that has a name for him, Phil Mickelson, like we just spoke about. But yeah, now people are going to know who Brooks Koepka, is and was, because he just won the U.S. Open. He just won it for the 2nd year in a row. But yeah, let me make sure we throw his name in there, because now you're going to know who he is. So it's going to draw attention to this week's tournament, which obviously is in Connecticut, called the Travelers. But one thing I did want to discuss, and I tell you, the course obviously, whooped the you-know-what of the players that were there, particularly Saturday. The conditions were tough, and the score suffered. I mean, you look at the, nobody's shooting under par for the entire tournament. Everybody finished over. You had one guy that ended up making a cut, finished with a 26 over par. It was a brutal course. It was a brutal weekend. And anybody that made it into the last series, or the last 8 holes or so, or 9 holes, still in the mix, deserves a lot of credit. Because think about it, if you've got professionals that are shooting 26 over for the tournament, you have a tournament where nobody shoots under par, how does that mean for everybody that is not a professional? Everybody that's an amateur, everybody that considers himself a golfer, or somebody like me that sucks at golf? How would I shoot in that tournament? I could have started shooting on Thursday. I'd still be hitting shots today. It's Tuesday the next week. I'd still be finishing off my first round. So these guys obviously deserve credit, and I do understand the humbling experience and how somebody may say, hey, you know what, I golf But you know what? I don't miss shots like that. And they may say they don't. But you realize somebody in a public eye is going to get a lot more attention than you doing any silly thing on a golf course. You, that one that considers yourself better than a professional, he's going to ask for a mulligan. He's going to embarrass himself when he's 6 or 7 putts. But I tell you, the one thing that stood out to me, and obviously, great job by Brooks Koepka. Tommy Fleetwood, a tremendous final round on Sunday. 7 under par, 63. One shot away from setting the all-time record for the best round shot in a major. I tell you, the pace of the last series of holes kind of stood out. Dustin Johnson, obviously, a great job a couple weeks ago, went in the tournament right before it, and was in the mix. Was the leader after day one, was certainly in the mix over the last couple days. Had a very good chance, in the final round to make a run and win this tournament. And he is literally walking at a snail's pace. Every time he's getting set for a putt, it's like it's the Yankees and the Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball. It's like, when you see the Yankees and the Red Sox play a game, it's like they are discussing with each other ways to slow the game down. This game should end in 3 hours, but we're going to find a way to make this game go 4 or 4.5 hours. How can we slow this game down? That's exactly what Dustin Johnson and his caddy were doing on Sunday. And I understand everybody's got their own pace. He wants to make sure that he has all the information. He wants to make sure that he strikes the ball in the right position to hopefully get himself a 1 putt as opposed to a 2 or 3 putt. But I'll tell you one thing, the amount of time he was taking between shots was not helping him. How many putts did he have in the final round? It was 30-something. So obviously the amount of time that he was taking to make sure that he thought about how he was going to hit the ball. I'm going to give some advice. Stop thinking. I mean, he single-handedly, him and his caddy, made that last round go on forever. And I'm sitting here thinking this is Yankees Red Sox. I'm thinking this is Steve Trachsel on the mound in the 6th inning of a game with runners on 1st and 2nd. Him literally taking a nap on the mound as he's getting set to pitch. You want to talk about penalties, penalizing Phil Mickelson for hitting a ball that was in play. Is golf at some point going to enforce penalties for somebody that's literally taking forever to hit the ball? I remember it was like 2005. I'm at a Mets game and Steve Trachsel is on the mound. And there's a couple guys on base pretty similar to what I said before. And he's taking forever to pitch. And he's standing there, he's at the set position, he stops, he steps off the mound. And finally, as he's sitting there pausing, you hear somebody, throw the damn ball! It's kind of what I wanted to say to Dustin Johnson in the final round on Sunday. Hit the damn ball! It's one of those things that was just driving me nuts. But obviously, a great round of golf that I think was played. I mean, I look at some of those greens and I'm like, man, it's like there's rocks in there, there's divots. Like, how could you, as a professional golfer, be expected to hit the ball straight? It looked like there were so many distractions there, and I think you hear from a lot of people afterwards that it was such a difficult course to play. The greens were very rough. I mean, a lot of times you saw a ball that was hit that was going straight that all of a sudden just got like side-swiped and kind of went a different direction. You needed to really get lucky to be able to hit the ball from a certain distance and have it go straight in the hole. You could have the best shot, put it in the best position, judge the wind the best way you can, have it going right to the hole, but you had to promise yourself, or you had to get some sort of promise that the ball was going to stay on the course of which you hit it. So I give everybody credit out there for performing the way they did, but, listen, Dustin Johnson, I mean, it wasn't like the speed that he was going, which was beyond slow. He was taking forever to hit his putts. It wasn't like it was helping him. I mean, he was doing just as bad as anybody else. In some cases, he was costing himself opportunity to get back in his tournament. Make a run at Brooks Koepka. Make a run at Tommy Fleetwood in the ridiculous round that he had on Sunday. And obviously, we opened the show today talking a little soccer. Last week, we spoke about how, you got Greece and Turkey and Holland and Ireland and the United States and Italy. All teams that are considered, at least known in a World Cup, not playing. You had a thing going on today with Egypt and the own goal. And my suggestion that you don't attach a person's name to a goal that goes in his own net. You could potentially save that person's life. Compare Dustin Johnson to Steve Trachsel today. But before we get going today, and I do want to remind everybody the program is brought to you by JohnPielli.com as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. And I did want to mention that there's a musical theater camp for 2018 that's going to be held over at the St. Aloysius Church from the 9th to the 13th. It's actually their 8th annual faith formation outreach. Their musical theater camp at St. Aloysius Church, July 9th through 13th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. A fun week of singing, dancing, and acting for boys and girls age 7 to 17. For information, please email the SA Theater Camp, satheatercamp@gmail.com, or visit the site, STALMUSICALTHEATER camp. And any information, obviously, reach out to me, comment if you're interested in going forward with anything about that. But the last thing I wanted to get into, I'm going to introduce a new part of the show. And if you just listen real quick, a little bit of a bumper. If you're interested in going forward with anything about that. But the last and we're going to talk about that in 1 second. So here it is, the new part of the program.
Or ain't nobody's listening anyway. Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Once again, this is the Passball Show brought to you by JohnPielli.com. So, the one thing that I'm going to get into that has no relation to sports, and I tell people all the time, if I get away from sports, it's something that doesn't appeal to you or something you don't want to hear, you could always rewind the show from the beginning when I am talking about sports. And these little things that I get into are only going to last a couple minutes. So I was thinking the other day, we all live in circles where we deal with people, whether it's coworkers, whether it's family members, whether it's friends that we think are our friends that we realize are not our friends. But in some cases, we have no way of knowing. So I was thinking about this the other day because, it was about 3-4 weeks ago. I was at work. I was in a scenario where I'm like, you know what? This person that I'm dealing with is being so fake. And we all can relate to that. We could all relate to, fakeness as it exists amongst us. And I'm thinking about how it applies to work, because we all have jobs where, people are brought in, we're all employed, we're all getting paid to be there. Nobody's there by choice. So when we show up at our jobs, it's not a social event. The fact that we're going to our jobs and working because we're being compensated to work there is the only reason that we're there. So you don't have to get along with your coworkers. You don't have to establish a relationship with people just because you work with them. But if you're going to be outward in your opinions about the way you feel about somebody, it makes it awkward for you. It makes it tough to continue the relationship that you have that's supposed to be professional. It's not supposed to be cordial. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It certainly doesn't have to be friendly. So I was thinking, because we all live in environments where we're amongst people, especially people that we work with, that we want to get a sense of whether they're being fake with us in their cordiality, I guess, if I'm going to expand that word. And we use social media, right? So we're all involved in social media. I thought about it the other day, and this was about 2 weeks ago that I was thinking about this, and I was waiting, and I was thinking about when was the best time to bring this up in this show. And I guess that time is right now. If you're not sure if a coworker of yours is being real with you or is being fake with you every time you speak with them, send them a request on social media site. In other words, if that person is full of crap when they're talking to you, but can't man up and just tell you, listen, I'm being nice to you because I have to be because we're working, and they're actually just kind of lying to your face, best way to go? Request to connect with them on social media. Because if that person dislikes you that much or has that much of an issue with you, they're probably not going to accept your attempt to connect with them. That's a way to figure it out right away. But last thing, I'm going to recap the show today. We've talked a lot of soccer and golf today. If somebody scores a goal in their own net accidentally, should their name be attached to that forever? Because in hockey it isn't. And anybody that follows hockey knows that if a shot is put from a point or somebody flicks a puck in the net and it happens to go off of a defensive player and into their own net, that defensive player doesn't have their name tied to that goal being scored. So why don't we do that with world soccer? Maybe we could prevent our next tragedy of that guy that bicycle kicked the ball on his own goal, several years ago and ended up getting murdered. Because there was a mistake today. A ball went off of a player from Egypt's leg and into his own net. And then you hear that guy's being credited with a goal for the other team. Now, I think we could be a little more proactive and potentially save somebody's life down the road. Dustin Johnson taken forever on Sunday in the final round. There was nobody that was taking that long to make his putts. He reminded me of Yankees Red Sox on a Sunday night. He reminded me of Steve Trachsel or any of those baseball pitchers that literally take forever to throw the ball. The guy's sitting in a set position with runners on base, and you hear somebody in the background, throw the damn ball already! Obviously, you have the Phil thing, the snobs versus the slobs. If you're talking about it from a media standpoint, obviously the golf traditionalist is going to have a bigger deal about what Phil Mickelson did when he struck that ball that was still in motion. Lots of things to think of. But everybody, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to the first of several editions of the Nobody Cares segment, which we're going to play every one of these shows during the week. Hopefully we'll be back with you tomorrow. This is the Passball Show brought to you by JohnPielli.com. As always, thank you for tuning in. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.